Hey, everybody. Welcome back to episode 35 of Oneself. My name is Stephen Marr. With me today, with me always, is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today, my friend.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Steven. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Of course. It's my absolute pleasure. Last
Cool.
night, folks, I was at an open mic, in which I love going to open mics and, seeing people express themselves in art. And it's just a fun way to get out and meet people. And I met this lovely couple next to me. We were really diving into it, right? I love when you can have a conversation with a stranger, but like really cut through to meaningful conversation, right? Not just about the weather or what have you. And we ended up talking about masculinity, right? A lot. And just the what I perceive to be the warped nature of what men should think or feel. And I reference my childhood growing up, with the men that I was around, uncles, fathers, brothers, just not to saying that they're still like that, right? Like, everyone's done a lot of work, but what the examples I was shown as a young child was very unhealthy when it's like, to be, you got to be a man and you got to be tough and you got to be this and you got to be that. And like what my definition of a man was completely different from what I now consider to be a healthy masculine presence. And, and we brought that up because, this guy's had a similar story, right? Like with his dad, and he had a similar thing. And I was like, yeah, man, and I'm really trying to embrace like the feminine and the softness and not to say like but also to be capable, right? He brought up the quote, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And it's like, yes, like I don't want to be naive to the nature of the world. Like I know there's people that are willing to do me harm potentially, right? And so it's like I don't want to be, an easy fool or victim of whatever. Like if something happens, I want to be capable of defending myself or the ones I care about, right? And not that I wanna, commit violence, but it's like I don't wanna be an easy target against those that want to as well. And so it's like I understood his perspective on that, absolutely, in that quote. And, to a large part, I agree with it. At the same time, though, as well, especially as, a musician, an artist, it's like to embrace the vulnerability or the softer sides of being a man. It's like those aren't bad things. And like I was brought up to think that, my thoughts, my feelings, the softer nature of life was a bad thing. And the conclusions I've reached now, it's just like, no, like all that stuff is beautiful. And then we see what men are doing around the world. And it's like my heart aches from it, right? Because we just we just we're going to, you see young men dying across the world for the egos of old men. And that's, because that's what it's supposed to be. That's what you're supposed to be as a man, and just to be tough and, go out there and, and figure it out. And, but I don't think that is a way to, create balanced, right? Balanced men, balanced individuals. And, and again, you know, like we referenced in the last episode, not trying to tell anyone what to do, what to think. Hopefully just getting you to think, right? Pose questions of like, what does that look like? What does a healthy man look like? And um, yeah, brother, that's my little opening spiel for today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, like you said, not trying to tell anyone how to think, but I would say, there's a motivation within me, and I believe within you, to just create curiosity in others in order to cause them to ask some questions. Right? Just have that curiosity to become to motivate oneself to become a more keen observer of life in the world around us, because in my opinion, as far as I can see, all we need to do is look around us. Just look to see that the way that we're doing it is not working, which seems very obvious, once we peel back some layers, just with the way that we're treating each other and the way that we're treating the planet, the way that we're treating other sentient beings on the planet. It doesn't seem like it's going very well. we're still in this phase of our evolution where we are through our choices creating an immense amount of sufferings. Yeah, I think it's important. It's just important to observe and draw our own conclusions. I just see like what feels best, what seems like it would work, what seems like it might work better than the way we're doing it right now, and that's how I would respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said suffering, right? And that's absolutely true. I think the men and the role models I when I think of, like, the best role models in my life that were men, it's like, yes, like, it's like they were tough, right? Like, they understood that life was tough, but they were also soft in their toughness, right? Where it's like it was more of a guidance rather than a forceful nature. And, I look upon those mentors with fond I remember so, like, when I was 18, I was, starting to get into fitness, right? And, the more I was always, doing sports and stuff as a kid, but, like, really starting to, like, take fitness seriously. And I was at a park near where I grew up, and there was this group of guys doing, like, these crazy workouts, like, hanging ropes from a tree and, like, climbing up the ropes and, like, having a rucksack and, like, doing these, like, intense workouts. And, I went, I asked, I was like, "Can I work out with you guys?" And they're like, "Yeah, like, of course." And it started the beginning of this, beautiful relationship with this group of men. They were all, they were a lot of them were ex-military, a lot of them were in the emergency services, firefighters or EMTs or, whatever. And they were just trying to like have cool workouts and stay in shape. And they like those workouts were tough, man. Like they kicked my butt. And, but I kept going back. I kept going back every week, every Saturday. And just to keep going. And it was awesome. Like I did stuff that I didn't even know I was capable of, right? And so like they fostered this growth in me and this beginning of this physical journey, which I've carried in the rest of my life of like physical fitness and health and wellness. But they were like soft in the way they did it. They're like, like this is gonna suck. This is gonna be tough, but like you can do it. One foot in front of the other. Like things that they told me, like have stuck with me ever since. Like anytime I'm doing something hard, um, it's like, don't look at the whole full picture, right? You'll go insane. It's like just
Yeah,
the next step, just focus on the next rep, the next set of exercises. Like, don't look at the whole workout, just do the, things that have stuck with me forever. And I look at those beautiful examples and like, those are men I admire, right? Growing up and like how they taught me and fostered that in me and, and put that growth in me. And I was like, that I think they were beautiful examples of what the man I want to be, right, for others, for when people are younger around me. When I see the inverse of that, right, the examples in my life growing up where, that where it was clear, I saw men who were suffering, making children suffer, right, because that's what they thought that, they wanted me to, again, I don't know, be ready for the harshness of the world or whatever
exactly.
you want to
Yeah,
call it. And it's like, yes, absolutely. The world is a tough place. And so it's like for you to be tough too, it's like I gotta, treat you
yeah,
like shit so you're ready for it,
yeah,
And that
mm,
was in football, growing sports, growing up, my, whatever family, whatever the case was. Like it was just like all these examples around me of just like this toxic masculinity in order to prepare me for the world. And so like I think the goal was noble, but the how they went about it was in my opinion just wrong, right and wrong, and
yeah,
perpetuating the trauma and the things that we're trying to change in this world, and the observations that we make that are just not serving anybody. So it's like I experienced both, right? When I was a young man, I experienced the toxic side of it and the healthy side of it, and my goodness, like did I get so much more and carried so much more out of the positive masculinity and the positive
yeah,
examples of like that firm toughness, but with a gentleness, with a guidance, with a softness. And so, if anyone's listening out there, men or women, right? It's just like I know the world is a tough place, but in order to prepare our children or the younger generations for what's to come, I think you get so much more out of it while having the awareness of yes, it's difficult to exist in this world, but also doing so with a softness, with a vulnerability. And because like those lessons still stay with me. They stuck way more than the traumatic men, going through stuff and working it through,
hmm
working through their issues with children on a football field or whatever the case was in my
yeah,
childhood.
yeah. And it's like Understanding that those examples, the negative ones, can be just as valuable as the positive ones, as we've discussed many times. Like, it's great to see an example of how not to do it, as well as it is to see an example of how to do it. And in those cases of those men who are just trying to go through life, so rigid, thinking they got to be like, so hard and tough all the time. Uh, from my perspective, it looks like a group of people who have just missed the opportunity to make those observations that that doesn't work. So rather than empowering oneself to become a keen observer of life and draw one's own conclusions, it's just instead replacing that with, or not even replacing, instead just holding on to that programming which is already filtered down to them through society, through family and peers and stuff. So like like the archetype or the sort of assumption that men are supposed to be tough all the time, like just always hard. It's like I'm just gonna listen to that nonsense programming rather than observing the world around me and seeing that those guys who are living by that code are usually miserable and are actually, in my experience, from what I've observed, the guys who are pretending to be like that tough all the time are actually the least adaptable, the least resilient. So, we could read that if we want to look from the perspective of that toughness, macho attitude. It's like they're kind of the least tough because they don't realize that the tree that survives the storm is not just the one that's like tall and big and strong. It's like it also has to bend and sway with the wind. The one that's like super rigid just snaps and breaks, right? So we got to understand, and these nature analogies always work in my opinion, because we're all one and it all applies if we look close enough. So yeah, again, yeah, in
Yeah.
that example, look to nature for
We can learn a lot from
for the
nature.
answer. Exactly. Um, yeah, nature isn't attached either. So yeah, it's funny, right? Because that has been my experience. Is like the guys who are acting the toughest are often the weakest. Just to explain from that perspective, not like a judgment, but an observation. I saw this in my old job in emergency services a lot. In construction and just growing up, and there's always that mix within each group, whether it was like for me at the fire station or on like a construction site or playing sports or whatever. There's like maybe the 70-80% of guys who are going with the programming, thinking that they got to be tough all the time. They're really just posturing for the other men, trying to look tough rather than actually cultivating that inner strength. And then, there's maybe, this is just my opinion, it's just pulling these numbers out of the air from my experience, but the 20-30% that are actually, tuning into themselves, finding that inner resilience, building some real strength and like from an authentic place. They're tapping into their own authenticity and then moving through life with integrity. And in so doing, they, from what I've observed, move through life much more gracefully uh and are those strong pillars that other people can look to. Whereas the guys who are just pretending, it's like you might fool the a generation or two below you, right? Like, say like new guy on the job site, new guy at the fire hall might fall for the like, the tough guy act of the old guys. But once you're there for a little bit, you start to see through it. You say like, oh, these guys are, not good at what they do. They're not leading like from what I would choose for myself, a balanced personal life. So again, as we observe, we kind of see like, what examples do I want to follow, and recognizing that the quote unquote bad examples are just as valuable as the good ones, as I said a minute ago. Um, I think is a really important, at least in my experience, has been a really important thing to remember. It's just observe, see what works. Learn what you can from other people's examples. Also understanding that most of our learning is going to have to come through our own trial and error. But yeah, coming back to that place of like being 100%, one way, like being all the energy at the end of the spectrum. Okay, I'm supposed to be, you know, a masculine man is like, tough and doesn't show emotions. It's like, yeah, yeah, run that game out. Like play that out. Try going to that end of the spectrum. See how it works. If you can't learn enough by observing those around you that it doesn't work, then try it, and then you'll see that it doesn't work, and then you come back somewhere closer to the middle. Maybe a little bit of a pendulum swing. Try being really soft for a while. That also like doesn't work in this world. It's like as everything we're always trying to find a balance, always trying to find the middle, right? There's all these mystical traditions talking about the way and the middle way and the Tao. It's like these unspeakable things. We're coming to the middle. It's not being so defined by the polarity of our dualistic experience here.
I think too, it's the capacity to love as well,
Mm,
right? When it comes, especially when it comes to men, what's the balance when it comes to the examples I see in the past of like what not to do. This has been a lifelong journey with myself when it comes to like self love. Like this has been, only within the last couple of years have I truly felt like I've like loved myself. And even that's still a work in progress. And even that's still, to change my thought patterns or to observe my thought patterns and try to change them with intention. Is, you know, the capacity to love while also being balanced, right? Like we said, being aware, like I know not being naive to the nature of humanity and how much work we still have to do. And if another human wishes you harm, it's like, to not um just be and susceptible to that, just a lamb for the slaughter. So again, like, we go back to balance, but especially when it comes to men and what I observe is what I think we need to work a lot on is just our capacity to love. Number one, ourselves, and number two, others, right? That's been a lifelong journey for me because I don't think I was ever taught that, right? As a child. And just to like, just to love myself. I was told I was loved, right? You know what I mean? Like, "Oh, I love you, blah, blah, blah." And it's like, yeah, but to internalize that, to feel that for oneself took me a long time, and I see some beautiful examples now of people doing that where they're really teaching children to have the mature, like I've met some like amazingly mature children, brother, like, when they're
yeah, yeah.
doing like maybe they're meditating or doing yoga or and like so they have this like really healthy self-talk within their mind at a very young age, which
Mm,
amazing for them. I hope they go on and do amazing things.
yeah,
Like I'm a couple years late to that party. um but really inspiring to see that amongst yeah, yeah, it took a long way,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
really
Me too.
inspiring to see that amongst some children. And I've talked to teachers too. I know there's a bunch of issues within the education system as well. I know that's not like a blanket statement across the board. Like I know there's still a lot of work to do in all aspects of humanity, right? We're a work in progress. Perfection doesn't exist. But when it comes to the capacity to love for men, it starts internally and then hopefully expands outward. And I that is something that I think that's the key to this question that we pose, right? Of just like,
Yeah,
what is going on here with this, like the masculinity aspect of it. And when you take away love from masculinity, it leads to violent outcomes, I think. And you see
yeah,
that across the world. When we talk about the people in power who are doing this stuff, it's like it's like I don't even think they're capable of it. Maybe they have children and maybe they love their kids and like, yeah, they're not sending their kids into these wars. So it's like, yeah, maybe like they love their kids, but like to love your fellow man, to love a stranger, to love nature, to love humanity, despite its inherent problems, is an important thing to do that I do not see with those in power because it's just like blatant that they just have a complete disregard for the consequences of violence or the consequences of their actions of just flippant um yeah violence, man, across the globe. And so I think, again, cheesy, hippie, woo woo, whatever you want to say it, like I get it, but it's like the capacity to love, especially on the masculine side, because by and large, I feel like it's men starting all these this bullshit, like starting the wars, the ego, um, And so I think that's the key, man, is really just expanding our capacity to love on, especially within the masculine.
Yeah, and it's not like it has to be this cheesy woo thing because again, if we just observe, then we can come to a realization of truth, which is that those in power, those doing whatever an aspect of our egos don't like, an aspect of our egos like that don't like that behavior. We have to recognize that they're only in power because they're a reflection of us, and that's where it comes back to, like, the actionable steps for each and every individual. Everything is a projection of our own internal landscape, right? So, individually and collectively, we have to do the work on ourselves if we want that to change, and, in this separated egoic world that I know people can have a hard time with that, but when we look at the fact that so we say we need more love, right? Then perhaps first we need to get real about addressing the fact that we're holding on to fear, which is the opposite of love, so so strongly because that's the whole thing. It's funny you mentioned that quote, better to
Yeah.
be
Can we
a
just because I think that's really important. I think that's really important what you just said, because like people think the opposite of love is hate. And I
Mm.
think I totally agree with you. I think it's fear, right? Just to highlight that distinction. I really, really think that's powerful, man.
Yeah, well, like, why would you hate someone? Why would you hate someone in the first place? Like, because you fear them. You fear that they can do something to you. You fear that they have done something to you. And when we think that we're separate beings and we don't understand that this is all a cause and effect karmic situation and that we're all one being here expressing ourselves, mirroring each other back to each other, for that deeper realization, we're here for that experience, then that's where fear comes in, and that is the root of all that, anger, jealousy, hate, rage, whatever. All of that is rooted in fear, because if we had no fear, there would be no soil for those seeds to take root in. But the warrior in what is it? The warrior better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Like, and I've heard that quote many times, always given by men. Actually, in the town that you're in right now, that someone said that to me. He was trying to get me to come join his MMA gym. And I was like, "No, I'm good. I don't do that anymore. Thanks." And he's like, "Well, it's better to be." And I was like, "Yeah, I know the quote. Thank you. But like, I'm good. Thank you." The thing
Yeah.
that I've arrived at myself that I find so funny is like, it's one thing to like, so using the martial arts example, right? It's a beautiful thing to train like a traditional martial art, like say Aikido, which is like the 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 main idea there is like is being in tune with this art, this practice, but never ever using it. And it's the having of it, it's the full confidence in knowing that one carries those abilities that allow you to move through life without any fear, and therefore not taking on any of those triggers and causing one to react in a way that you would get yourself into a situation where you need to express those skills, which is why it's all great to train. In my opinion, it's all fantastic to train that stuff, but like, why do we have this need to compete and put it on television? And like I know it's this distorted ego trip, but like, just to pose the question, like, why do we feel the need to be entertained by someone winning and someone losing and turning, martial arts into sports? It's kind of in my opinion, a product of a sick society. But anyway, coming back to the whole warrior in a garden thing, it's like we can realize that, yeah, these martial arts are fantastic and all that stuff, but when it comes to self-defense, I think the highest form of that is yoga, and understanding that whatever situation you've drawn to yourself or gotten yourself into, none of it's random. It's all a product of your own karma, which means it's happening for a reason, which means getting straight with yourself and doing the inner work is far more valuable than training how to, punch someone in the chin really effectively. because wouldn't it be better to just avoid that situation entirely? And if you've got your inner world cleaned up, you're not going to be magnetizing those types of experiences into your reality. So, but then at the same time, on the other hand, on the other side of that coin, it's like, yeah, absolutely train your body, like, use resistance, have that knowing, that centeredness that comes through a practice of, strength training as well as some sort of, martial arts. That's fantastic. It's good, but just like this need to express it and this fear that it's going to be expressed against us, like, everybody training martial arts because they think they're gonna get, jumped at the bus stop. Like it's like, yeah, on the one hand, yeah, and like yeah, that was even my experience growing up. So like, I can't say that that's not valid, but I also can say, as I just said before, there's a reason I was in those situations in the first place. And like, no, when you get in a fight with somebody, it's like there's two people in that, or at least two people in that experience. It takes two for that dance to take place, and most of that stuff's avoidable. So yeah, coming back to like, yeah, I really, it's fascinating how men love to use that quote and to justify this, like, this fear-based action and practice, really, because I think that's what it comes down to. It's like it's a little bit of a defense, like like saying that quote is a little bit of a defense, when it's like, because you could just be like, why are you training? Like, why are you training BJJ and Muay Thai and like and boxing? Like, why? Because if you ask people that question, like, why? Like, "Oh, because I wanna compete." Why? Like, that's kinda messed up. You wanna go get in a ring, and, like, I'm saying this to my former self, you wanna go get in the ring and, like, risk your physical vessel, this gift that you've been given to move through this reality. You wanna risk that for no reason, and then also potentially really hurt someone else too. Like, that's twisted, that's sick. As I explained before, one of the absolute worst feelings I've ever had in my entire life was having my hand raised at the end of a boxing match, because I knew I didn't win anything. If the guy on the other side, like, he lost, then I lost too. And it was one of the most sickening feelings I've ever had. And it's just like, this is all fucking twisted. This macho tough guy shit is like really an expression of fear. And now for me personally, going on a bit of a tangent here, but like for me personally, when I see somebody who's like deeply, in that world, I see fear, I see insecurity. I don't see what perhaps a lot of other people see and what I used to see. Like, oh, big tough guy. I'm like, well, impressed, intimidated. I'm like, it's quite the opposite now. And understanding, like, because it's like, guys, we're more than our bodies. You don't need to be big and muscly. Like, sure, if you want to, but like, you don't need to be. That is not your full expression. Even if we're talking about masculinity, the depth of your being does not have a gender. The depth of, like, we don't we're moving beyond, we're trying to move beyond the awareness of this, of like expressing ourselves through these vessels in which we, and masculine, feminine, men and women, but like understanding that what we are is far more than that. So the being so incredibly hung up on the physical expression is just like, is a sign of immaturity, is a sign um of a lack of evolution, which is not a bad thing, again. But we're getting to this point here where we're shifting on this planet where so many people are waking up, and there's so many people who kind of feel that pull, but are still holding on to the old ways because of fear, because we've been so deeply entrenched in fear for so many generations. And it's kind of getting to this point though, where it's like, okay, we got to start loosening that grip. We got to start allowing that tide of change to pull us out and experience something new. Because again, if we're coming back to the observation thing, like, look around, it's not working. It has never been work. It has never, in this current paradigm, it has never worked. Again, we're trashing each other. We're trashing the planet. It's like, it doesn't make sense. So like, let's, loosen the grip. Sure. Train your martial arts, but maybe don't like compete. I don't know. It's my suggestion, but like, it's not such a big deal. We don't have to be so in fear. Yeah. Just recognize it by becoming keen observers of ourselves and life.
Yeah, man. And I think that, as we're talking about fear, which we theorize that is that that's the opposite of love, right? I think a lot of men are afraid, right? In the absence of this love that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and a lot of the actions that we do are fear based. And in order to elevate, humanity, masculinity, men at large. And again, as you said, I agree with you too. Like I could be a woman in the next life. Like this is just a perception
Yeah.
of ourselves where it's like, like we're neither masculine nor feminine at the end of the day. Like our soul, when we leave this body,
Yeah.
who knows what you're gonna be, next time around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
And
like
can
taking that into consideration while we're yeah, go for it. Jump in.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna say we're doing all of these things from a fear-based place and pretending that we're not. That's the thing. It's like, why do you have so many guns in your house? Like you're talking about your country. Like, why do people own so many guns? It's like, oh, because no, like because I'm into this and that. It's like, no, no, no. It's fear. It is fear. Why do you train so many martial arts? Like it's fear. Fear is we're doing all these things from a fear-based place and pretending that it's not because we're terrified. Why does everyone have so many security cameras everywhere? Like, it's just that that has exploded in the last 10 years. It's such a fear-based paradigm, and we're pretending it's not, and that's, like, where there's a sticking point, I believe, because we have to acknowledge what is before we can change. We have to accept what is before we can even begin to have a hope about changing it. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, yeah, no, I really appreciate you diving in and with that. And yeah, and acceptance that because again, it's like fear is this, especially when it comes to men, no one wants to be seen as cowardly or afraid
Yeah,
or any of that stuff. So it's like this we're all
yeah,
just like doing these behaviors to project that we're not afraid when actuality we're terrified. Like if I'm being honest with
yeah,
myself, like I was scared of a lot of stuff growing up.
yeah,
Um and and what does that do? Like, it leads to all these negative outcomes, when we're in denial of the fear, and what's the first part of that is just is, in the 5 stages of grief or whatever, it's acceptance of the fact
mhm,
that we're afraid, and that's okay,
mhm,
and that's the first step to going onto a more realized path that is rooted in love, and
yeah,
I know that, I can name a handful of men, that I've heard talk about this, like, in my personal life. Like, I obviously, if you go search, like, you go find the men, Alan Watts or, whoever, right? Or, like, they're talking about this sort of stuff. But, in my
yeah,
personal life, not often did I hear about men talking about these sort of things. And so I guess a goal with these sorts of conversations is just to like get it more into the culture, more into the collective consciousness because especially when you see the content that I'm seeing sometimes when it comes to like young men and I'm just like,
mm,
man, like that is just so far off of where I think we should be, whether it's,
mm,
putting down women or, yeah, like the machismo, whatever, like the masculine, or they're clearly doing some sort of gear or whatever the case is. And it's just like,
yeah,
what are you so afraid of, man? Like what's going on there? You afraid that like, people are going to think that, you're not a man
you're
or like,
not
but like
enough.
even like your definition of just based on what you are yeah, you're not enough, right? And it's just like my heart aches, right? Even though that the consequences of those sorts of actions are very real and, can sometimes be violent, right? Oftentimes can be violent. It's like my heart does ache for men across the world because it's like because yeah, they're so afraid and then but it's like who also set that system up and who's also
Yeah,
voting for it with our actions and choices every day. It's like we are still giving it power. And in
yeah,
order to change that, we just, there's gotta be something's gotta give, right? And hopefully, it's more in the direction of love. And again, starts within ourselves.
yeah. Starts within ourselves with just as I was saying before, like as we're saying here, like the acknowledgement of the truth. Like you're saying, like gotta accept the fact that you're afraid because that energy is there. Right? The energy is existing within. Look at our world. It's a fear-based world. Look at everybody, as I said, security cameras all over their houses. People own guns. People are training all this crazy stuff. It's, the fear is clearly there. Again, yeah, media, it's all fear. Like, we've been programmed to be that way, so it makes sense. We don't have to beat ourselves up about it, but it's like, accept the fact that everyone's afraid because as I said, if that energy's in there and we're not expressing it and we're not expressing it in a healthy way, which would mean transmuting it back into love, it's going to find its way out in other ways. And this is like we're talking about, it's going to find its way out by um, victimizing other people, and then men, we're living in patriarchy. Men are generally larger and stronger, generally speaking. This is happening, men are abusing women, each other, children, nations, on the macro scale, nations bullying each other. It's all because everyone is, like not acknowledging the fact that they're in fear. And in my opinion, like what is the root of fear is that illusion of separation. Cause it's like, if we realize that we're not separate and that like, there's the fear of death is also an illusion. There's, when we look closely enough at ourselves and life, all of the illusions begin to crumble and we begin to see the truth. And when we see the truth, we see just like every religion and mystic tradition throughout the ages has always said is like, do not fear, don't fear anything. Realizing that fear is rooted in the illusion of separation, and that, and this idea of our separate selves being something finite, the whole illusion of death. When we realize by looking more closely at that that's not the truth, then all fears begin to drop away. All fear begins to be seen as what it is, false energy appearing real. When we look more closely, it's just like it doesn't need to be, but it takes that ultimate courage, especially for men in this paradigm in our current society, to have the courage to actually look and be vulnerable enough to acknowledge that there is some fear in there. And while we've been told our whole lives that men aren't supposed to be afraid, it's like, wow, what a perfect system. What a perfect system for keeping us stuck. Ultimately, recognizing that we have to acknowledge our fear. And again, as we've been programmed our whole lives, as men especially, to not acknowledge fear, it's a perfect situation for convincing us to keep ourselves stuck in this position. Because if we're not acknowledging the energy that's in there, it's not we're not able to transmute it. We're not able to let it out in a healthy way. And instead we let it out in unhealthy ways, which then perpetuate that same fear-based paradigm. So having the courage to be vulnerable, I mean, I think is one of the greatest strengths that a man in this world can have, because it's the only way we're going to evolve. I think personally, is if we acknowledge the truth. We have to acknowledge the truth of what is and fully accept it before we have the ability to change any of it. Yeah, man. Recognizing everybody's afraid. It's like, I acknowledge my fear. It's like we have to acknowledge each other's fear and recognize it's okay. We're all in this together. Everybody's afraid. As far as I can see, the best way through it is to look directly at it and recognize that it was never real to begin with.
The stories we tell ourselves, right? And the stories that are told to us, a lot of it, yeah, this generational fear, the generational trauma that is passed down of, be this, be that, be
Mhm.
afraid, right? Even while we're told love, it's like, or even though we're told we're loved, or, in the religious context, in my own upbringing, it's just like, God loves you, but be terrified of committing sin,
Yeah.
or, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's a
Yeah.
very confusing,
Doesn't make
conflicting
any sense.
message, man. And so it's like, doesn't make any sense, bro. And so it's like, I'm not even surprised that everyone's afraid. It's like it's what was shoved in down my throat from the jump, And
Yep.
while again being told love is the answer, and then but like all the
Mhm.
actions and the messaging besides, it's all love, was completely warped. And so it's like I'm not even like upset or mad about people. It's like, what do you expect? And this is like
Yeah.
what we're told our whole lives. And it's not surprising. It's not surprising at all. but it's like the message was always there, and even in, even in like religious texts where it's like, it's all rooted in love. Any of the mystics or teachers in the past, everyone's coming back to that. We know that that is, the way, right? The message.
Mhm.
But it's like, what is getting in the way of that? And, once we acknowledge the fear, and because it's everywhere, man, like that, it's everywhere, like that sort of that programming. And we see now, right? In the media, like you mentioned, it's all fear. Be afraid of your neighbor, be afraid of immigrants, be afraid of each other, be afraid of Republicans or Democrats, be afraid of the left or the
Mm.
right.
Yeah.
It's 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 everything. It's everything. And that is just, a recipe for division, right? Division. I don't subscribe to it.
Yeah, man, and like you said, you understand when you look at it closely, and it's when we look more closely at something, when we become more keen observers, that compassion can grow because we understand why we're in fear. We understand why other people are in fear and why they're behaving the way that they are, because it makes sense. It follows logically that they would be, given the system in which they have grown up and in which they're existing. And, it's interesting. It's kinda like you said, we've been programmed with fear, but also there's been that like, that message the whole time, like, even in organized religion, "Be terrified, but it's all love." And it's like, that's kind of that inversion that has to exist, and, like, we have to get that little bit of truth that keeps us hanging on, or else everyone would have just abandoned it long ago. And I think that's a mechanism for control is giving us a little bit of the truth, but which we just innately feel and attach onto and follow because we can feel that that's real, and that's what keeps us coming back. But then on top of that is layered all this other stuff to program our subconscious with fear and lock us into all of these survival mechanism reactive patterns, which, I have to say drives our economy. So, it's recognizing, like, there is some truth there, and there's a reason that some of it does feel good while the rest of it feels bad. But we can just get to a place when we stop taking the word of other people for it. So again, using the organized religion example, when you stop taking the word of other people for it and rather go into your own personal experience and become your own observer, which is, what we're encouraging here. Become an observer and draw your own conclusions. Then we get to see that truth for ourselves. And then that fear dissipates and more of that love is invited in. More of that love is allowed to grow. Doesn't even have to be invited in. That's what we already are. We just remove the distortion. We remove the dirt on the lens through which we're looking so that we can see the truth more clearly is that which we have always been. The whole original sin thing, I'll just say, is straight up bullshit. There's no scary separated place that you have to work back to. It's like where our home and our natural place of being, our center, is actually centered in the seat of love and God awareness and one with our creator. So it's much better, really. It's a much better situation when we look more closely and see some
Yeah,
truth because
it feels
yeah.
so much better.
Yeah.
Rather than, you're a bad boy from the jump, and, you're,
Exactly.
like,
Doesn't make any
it's just,
fucking sense.
humanity was bad, humanity was evil from the get go, and, yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
oh man, like, yeah, yeah, don't subscribe to it, right? Don't subscribe
No.
to it. But Adam, any closing thoughts on episode 35 of Oneself when it comes to, masculinity being rooted in fear, and hopefully turning more towards love, y'all.
No, man, it's just, yeah, just a recap, like I love how you brought that up, expressing that we need more love because being stuck in fear is just, it's clearly not working. And that it's a simple message, and the simplest truths are, or the most profound truths are always the most simple. And it's that part of our mind that can have a hard time with that because we've been trained to think that higher and higher systems become more complex, but the paradox is that they also become more simple. So it's important to recognize that. I mean, it's important to recognize that we have to arrive at our own truths. So that these are the truths that we're arriving at, and we're, gently encouraging people to just become observers and see that this fear-based way of moving through life is not it, unless it is for you, and that's, you're gonna continue running out that karma. That's cool too. But I think most of us feel that we're starting to move in this other direction. So um, yeah, man, that's all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having a great conversation as always, man. And folks, if you like what you heard, please support us in any of the ways that are free. Share with a friend, like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. For people you like and want to support, please include us in that if you are supportive of these types of conversations and this sort of messaging. We really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time on Oneself. Next week, y'all. We'll be back. So see you then.
Take care.